Hello and good evening, everybody. Really good to get such a good audience for what's our first inaugural Spark Unplugged. For those who haven't heard of the format before, it's really simple. We pulled together a really cool topic. Tonight's going to be all about AI horizons. We pulled together some fantastic panelists. We look at some of the key things which are happening out there in the world. We take some Q&A and hopefully we give you some really good insights. So over the next 90 minutes, you will get a chance to meet some of our great panel who we've got here tonight with us in Manchester. We will talk to you about some of the observations that we see. We've got a broad kind of backdrop of people with different experiences on the panel. So make use of that. Stay active in the chat. The chat's private. We will be taking questions later. There will be some polls as we go throughout the evening. Before we came in to the session tonight, we'd done some pre-research and we picked out a couple of big topics that we thought we would give to two of our panelists to curate and answer so they can give you some real insights. We'll then move through that open Q&A via the chat, and then we're going to hear from Dave Clark from HiveMind, who's going to tell us a little bit more about what HiveMind are up to around the AI space and how we're trying to kind of accelerate kind of AI for not just customers, but for members and other organizations as well. So really cool 90 minutes ahead. So without further ado, I'll introduce myself. I'm Craig Wright. I'm going to host tonight's session. A little bit of backdrop on me. I've spent 20 years working in Google, working in Microsoft. I'm a MIT and Stanford grad, and I've spent that time really helping organizations think about innovation, think about how they create what comes next, using a whole bunch of technology waves, but from a human-centered design perspective as well. So alongside me tonight, to my left, I've got Dave Clark. Do you want to say hello, Dave?
Yeah, I am a co-founder of HiveMind with Lyndon Doherty. I'm actually sort of here as much to listen and learn as well, because I think it's impacting on HiveMind massively, AI. So I'm looking forward to learning and contributing a little bit, but it's exciting to be here.
Next to Dave, we have the fantastic Mark Strefford. Mark, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. So yeah, Mark Strefford. So much of my career, I've worked for global consultancies, predominantly in the area of digital transformation, led technology teams on national and international projects. And the last 10 years have been almost entirely focused on AI, data, enterprise adoption, doing the strategy as well as in amongst the dev team as well. So I guess I could be the coder or the techie on the team as well.
Awesome, thank you, Mark. And finally, we've got Pat. Pat, do you want to say hello?
Hello, I'm Pat Schubert, and apparently expert. However, I'm trying to navigate through the water of AI. For 20 years, I've been researcher, consultant, speaker, strategist, navigator of business process, currently researching it as well. But predominantly, it was financial industry and life science, and happy to just share some insight, but learn a lot.
And also the best dressed here tonight.
Yeah, best dressed award goes to Pat, straight up.
Dress for us if you want.
Definitely.
So we've got some great panelists, we've got some great questions lined up, and hopefully it's a real opportunity for people to learn a lot and ask questions and get involved. When we first thought of this event, we kind of wanted a big headline to come in with, and the one that we chose was AI will never be as basic as it is right now, but for most organizations, it's still a stretch. AI is a phenomena. It's more than just a technology wave, I think is how we'll be discussing tonight. It's more like the advent of electricity. It is quite basic at the moment, but everybody is starting to see the possibilities for AI, not just in business, but around society and what it can mean to the world moving forwards. However,
can I answer the question then, Craig? Is it just a tool or not?
It's not just a tool in my mind, Dave. I think it's more than a tool.
Hell of a tool if it is just a tool.
I think it's got some way to go, as we'll cover, but I think it's probably more than a tool for most people, and it will change the way that most things get done.
I think so.
However, what we do need to address, I guess, as we go through the next 90 minutes, is that for most organizations, it's still a stretch. So whether that's getting hold of skills, whether that's getting the right data in place, whether that's identifying the right use cases, identifying value, there's a bunch of things that people need to look at. And I think we're coming out of a period where there's been a element of, I would call it technology debt, but I think it's broader than that. It's innovation debt and it's business debt for a lot of organizations where investments maybe haven't left them in the right position to be able to move forward. So that's kind of where we're going to go and what we'll be talking about. And I think the first thing that we kind of wanted to cover, and we've seen a lot of noise around this, when we look back, the origins of AI, beginning around the 1950s, and it was relatively quiet until the early 2020s.
And sorry, I've said it before, we were talking about this earlier. When you put that figure at the 1950s, I'm thinking, I'm in Manchester, this is where one of the first computers was built in the 1950s. So you're sort of saying, in the 1950s, AI was mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah, and if you look back at the history of the algorithms that we use today, so everyone's familiar with deep learning, that's based around artificial neural networks. They were like the perceptron came around in the 1950s, maybe 1960s, don't remember the exact date, but it is, yeah. And I think looking at the graph and how it that rate increases, in the early 2000s we had huge increase in compute power and accessibility of data, so obviously the internet enabled that. Yeah. But now you're really seeing the algorithms have really taken a big step forward.
And I think the key question here is to Dave and the panelists, Pat and Mark, what do we think will happen? We've seen the metabolic rate of iteration, if you like, around AI really accelerate over the last few months. Is this going to continue? When do people jump on?
Yeah, so it's interesting because again we've had a lot of conversations today about this, and one of the things that's driving the rate of growth now is there was an invent of a new technology. Well, I'll say invented. Transformers became more prevalent, and I think it was 2018 that Google released a research paper on them. That underpins all of these large language models. The huge volume of text data out there, and also multimodal, as we'll talk about shortly, has enabled us to create these really amazing, I'll say, tools, right? But at some point that data is going to exhaust. We don't
literally run out of data.
Yeah, and we training LLMs on LLM generated text or data is, not going to get very far. I think there's quite a lot of examples of modal collapse, as it's called, where it just starts spouting garbage. So I think as will ChatGPT 5? Yeah, will that be so much better than 4? I don't know. I'm sure it will be a step change. Will it be a 6, etc.? But I think for me, it then comes down to verticals. So LLMs, or let's say language models that are very much focused on an industry vertical where they can be tuned much more accurately for that data.
Pat, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the accessibility that we currently have to any AI systems. And yes, generative AI is something that you can just go to a website, ask a question, and you have immediate results, whether they're good or bad, but you do have results. Now, some years ago, to have results that quickly, it was nearly impossible, and you needed to have more skills and know how to spin off some models based on data and then just revise the results. Currently, we have kits which can play with generative AI, and then we have some results. And the difference between last year and this year, you can compare some actors eating spaghetti and the latest model of a video, and it's just like, how many, 12 months? So it is exponential, the accessibility is there, but at the same time, we have cost that is inherited as per energy.
So we think that it will stabilize, and people will find a much more stable point to jump onto the AI kind of use case bandwagon.
I think so, at least until the next iterations in algorithms comes along, and the game will probably change. We'll see an equal step change at some point. But I think cost, as you've just mentioned, is
bottleneck basically.
Yeah, and the business value around some of these models. I think OpenAI and the amount of money it costs them to run their operation versus the profit or the revenue they get is I think it's been debated. So
it's expensive.
Yeah, it could be a number of things that slow it down, should we say?
And Mark, you made mention of it there. Already this year, we've seen AI leap from predominantly being natural language based, so people using as close to natural language based as to new syntax with prompt engineering, into kind of multimodal interfaces. And what we mean by this is AI which automatically gets infused into experiences from kind of sight, from sound, and from other sensory elements, so they go multimodal. How do you see this, or where do you see this being of advantage to both business and society? Is this a really exciting advancement? You know, I read today on the plane on the way to Manchester that you know, Apple were readying the IntelliPhone so that we could have devices on our being which could leverage these new types of capabilities. Where are we going to see this used? Anything on this?
I'm thinking about societal barriers, that if you have multimodal interfaces, it means that you don't need to type the question. You can utilize different sensors can provide you the answers. So yes, the access to knowledge will be cheaper. And given that we have, for instance, coaches which are just guiding you through questions, sometimes to find the truth hidden somewhere. Imagine that 5% of these coaches are in Africa currently. So to give access to coaching and to literature review, or for instance to any knowledge in some regions, will be really beneficial. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it, because it can be not just like a co-pilot, but your intelligence augmented through the technology, helping you and navigating.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what Pat said. I think it was showed that the video came around on LinkedIn quite a few times around partially sighted or visually impaired people, and how these kind of languages or these models can describe in natural language what's happening. I think is fantastic. And education and training, I think, as well. You know, if a syllabus is, you know, these 10 steps and you're falling down between steps 4 and 5, can these models be used to generate content that helps you learn because it's observing what you learn?
A dynamic syllabus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with some end target in mind, right? You know, but I think the more I think about this, I read something the other day about. And he said when electricity wasn't invented, was it? When it was, I guess, made available through mass distribution. Yeah.
Harnessed.
No one really knew the societal implications of that, right? You know, it's not just about putting lights on instead of using, you know, someone with a big long stick and some gas, right? It became a very different way of.
They had to re-engineer factories.
Yeah. This, I don't think we've even got close to what this stuff can do.
I think we're going to see some real innovation around how AI use cases exist in terms of the industrial world. So, you know, for example, could this be used in multiple scenarios for engineers who visit physical sites and want to see key data on physical infrastructure? So I think there's probably some cool use cases I've seen emerging around that space, but it's definitely an addition from natural language processing. You know, one of the things I'd seen with natural language processing was that if you go into the workplace and look at certain demographics, they might have been trained to be a copywriter. They've never been trained to be a prompt engineer, nor have they been trained to be an editor of the content that the prompt generates. So what we're starting to see there is, you know, that some of these multimodal interfaces will remove that need for people to learn that new syntax, which is quite interesting. So, you know, I guess, you know, if we move along and we look at some of the other headlines which are coming out here around AI, one of them said no industry is safe. 93% of CEOs are worried about disruption. I guess the question here to the panel is, should they be? And if they should, which industry should be most worried in the near term? Any ideas?
I can take that a little bit. The role of a CEO is looking for decades in an organization. So they should see what is coming and in which direction an organization might be navigated, and then decompose that in provision and so forth. The problem is that we don't know where we'll end up with AI. Worried, we had this conversation a little bit earlier, and I think that worried is a big word. I would say maybe concerned about what are the risks connected, have some mitigation, but definitely have a groundwork of knowledge, experimentation that will help them to do not be worried, but just having some contingency at least. It is really hard to say what's going to happen.
So just doubling down, where do we think, which industries?
So for me, the ones that have got a rich set of data already would be the ones that are probably prime for a transformation. So examples of things like customer service, where you've got call logs and transcriptions, you've got emails, chat transcripts, etc. And we've seen this with Klarna, haven't we? And the much publicised benefits they're seeing from adopting this kind of technology at the front end. I think it was 70% of their calls are handled by an LLM rather than a person. So that's definitely one. Medical for sure would be another one, where you've got a lot of. I know there's guidelines that would need to be enforced around that and regulatory requirements, but there's a lot of images and there's a lot of text. So how do we, that I think is one that would be.
If we look at the work which is repeatable, we already have RPA over the robotic process automation. So it's already there. The hyper automation would be a next stage. Now, you can only automate that much, and you cannot take human from equation completely, because as per decision, we need to understand how the decision has been made. If one of our colleagues, or subordinate for lack of a better term, will make a decision, there is some groundwork to be done before. There is a rationale for this decision, and it's not black box, so we can just have a conversation why you have done this decision like that. And maybe the answer will be, I had a just gut feeling. And I totally agree, the most important decisions in our lives are always taken through gut feeling. Yeah. But how you will explain how the decision has been made if we don't know, if the AI is unexplainable.
You guys must have experienced it, I have, where you've used ChatGPT and it's given you something, and if it's in an area where I do generally consider myself an expert, which is narrowing as I get older, but you go, that's absolute bollocks.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Human needs to be at the end of the decision, and just it looks like a.
I think if I look back on my own experience, I did a piece of work probably getting on for a decade ago with an early AI capability around automating some experiences in wealth banking. And what we found is the customer demographic who it was targeted at actually weren't ready from a mindset perspective to take advice from a machine. The human element was super important. We actually diverted attention to automating some of the tasks to make the experience of the relationship managers slicker, so they could free up more of the time to be more valuable to the customers. And I do wonder what we'll see with AI in some of those environments is it takes a lot more of the routine load and frees up the human element for the relationship building.
It's an interesting point, actually, because if you look at, let's say, e-commerce or like retail, I'll say fast fashion brands without necessarily mentioning any, might leverage this kind of AI because they can scale much quicker. But if you look at prestige brands, high brand, like Louis Vuitton and the like, they will probably want to retain a huge amount of that in-person experience because it's part of the brand and the buying experience.
So building on this, if on this element of CEOs, another headline that we saw, and the stats fairly compelling. 73 to 86% of CEOs believe AI will lead to significant change. Many CEOs are lining up to, as they would title it, self-disrupt their own organization rather than be disrupted. If you were one of these CEOs looking to self-disrupt in a constructive context, in a constructive way, to get advantage from AI, what would you be looking to do?
Well, I'd want to find the area that I could try it out in first, an experiment. And I actually do think that, by the way, if you've got some of the people out there listening, if you've got a progressive, iterative, prototyping type CIO, this isn't going to be too scary. Find the area, find the problem, test, design thinking, agile thinking mindset to deliver and prototype it. That's where I'd go, and I'd look for the use case that gave me a quick demonstration of results. Don't go into a multi-million pound transformational program. For God's sake, just avoid.
Yeah, so firstly, that pulsing number is a bit hypnotic, and I'm wondering what subliminal messages are going into my head on the back of it. But so we're building on what Dave said. I know, yeah.
The clock's ticking, Mark. The clock's ticking.
But based on I guess adding to what Dave said, I think there's opportunity where it's not just about innovating and disrupting in the organisation. It's about how you can disrupt the market. I know we talked about Klarna already, but if you've got that kind of capability which you've used to disrupt your own organisation, can you then take that as a customer service, attuned customer service product across your competitors, even into other industry sectors?
Yeah, it's a really, I mean, from my own perspective, it's a really interesting one because having come from organizations where I ran programs to help C-suites rethink and disrupt, what we found is many of them weren't able to think deep enough in the context in which they existed because they were so busy that creating the space to unlearn what's gone before and reapply technology and reapply modern mindsets for the modern world was a really difficult task to do. So, when I read this, I think that there is, to your point, Dave, a lot of muscle that's going to need to be built around these organizations in areas such as experimentation, such as design thinking, and there's a lot of education which is going to need to take place to make sure that all corners of the organization get on board and contribute.
So I'll add to that. Last year, and literally last year, because that was about June 2023, I've been at a symposium and did a small presentation, and the title was "The Time Is Now," not to just to quote the famous song, but it was "The Time Is Now" about AI, because you could tell that it can augment our abilities as a social factor for humans. We can stay with creative work to be done while maintaining all the analytical part of our mundane maybe processes. That can help, but are we ready? Because it has been a year and we're still fighting about ethics. We are trying to figure out everything, but are the organizations ready? And I'm heading up to Mark, data. Are we leaking data? How our data is prepared? Can we literally consume that data so we can have some business intelligence out of it? Or maybe our data is obsolete and we don't need to that much. So that's an open question, I would say.
Yeah, data is, there's a saying, isn't it? Data is the new oil. But I think sometimes it takes time to get value out of that data. And
as an EV driver, I'm not sure I like oil.
Do you not? Okay. I thought you were a Porsche. No, okay.
Yeah, well, you don't want to really get into the artificial intelligence inside a Tesla, do you?
No.
Not really.
But Dave, we were talking about manufacturing before, weren't we? In the way that they're, at least one of the companies, and it's not just about, you can of course tell the story.
Well, they're not. No, it's that they just don't feel so threatened, because if you've got huge manufacturing plants, you don't feel quite as threatened. But they are trying to reduce costs, and they are trying to take out jobs. Of course they are. They want to reduce costs and manufacture more efficiently.
It's going to take a very brave C-suite to be the first mover on really affecting the labour market in their industry from a brand perspective. And I think the technology will probably reach the capability to do that sooner than the brands are looking along the line.
Craig, we're also aware of a few places that we know about where their business model has literally vanished. It's gone. There is no business left. But no amount of changing or fiddling will make any difference. They're finished. They are over.
It happens all the time.
Yeah,
Apple can cannibalize their own products.
Yeah. And I think that's a great intersect, Dave. I mean, the concept of generative AI, as Sam Altman said, is still in its early stages. We've only scratched the surface with what it can do. One of the things that, one of the stories that we like to recount is Sam Altman stood up and asked investors for, I believe it was about $7 trillion.
Yeah.
And said he was going to use it to build an all-knowing machine of sorts, which sounds very exciting and very romantic. But the investor said, how will we get the money back? And he said, just have faith. And what we'll do is we'll ask the machine when it's built.
Which we did then agree, we don't think he got the money.
We're not sure we got the money, so if Sam's listening, let us know. That'd be fantastic. But I think what it does is it opens up a fantastic conversation around business models and AI. At the moment, we've got obviously got the humans who are supported by AI, but it isn't that far away from Pat's point earlier. I don't believe, from having AI-centric business models where it's inverted. And we get smart. We get smart models.
Situation where you've just got two businesses talking to each other that have no human interaction going on.
100%.
I actually can.
I think we've already got there when you start setting some of your smart devices in the home to talk to one another. The outcome might not be that intelligible, but we're not far away from people being able to send a marketing signal from a CRM platform or a marketing platform, and somebody else being able to receive it and respond.
Yeah. What the AI over in that company goes, I really like the marketing you've just done to me, and I like it, and eventually they'll buy something between the two of them, and we won't.
Vicious circle.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Wow. Yeah. What did we say about when we talked about this? AI's ability to change business and society. Business 100%, society almost certainly. That is my view.
Yeah, it's going to definitely change how people skill.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also talk about, will it be the first single person billion-dollar business? Because it's that single person just orchestrates the whole thing through AI agents.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
So that this kind of leads us on. There's a lot of talk again out there in the press and in different locations on whether AI is an opportunity for most organizations or a threat. And I think there's a poll that we've opened up, and we'd love the feedback from the people who are listening to understand whether they think it's an opportunity or a threat for most businesses. But what I would ask the panel in the room is, based on the conversations you've had with different orgs, how do they view it? Because from my perspective, I think at the moment it's neutral.
Do you know, I've been thinking about this since you asked it earlier today, Craig, and I think it also depends where you sit in the organisation.
yeah.
If I'm doing a particular type of job of a particular sort of level, then I'll view it as a threat. If I'm looking at optimising and increasing my profitability and growth at the C-suite level, I might think of it as a fantastic opportunity. So it made me stop and think, for a lot of people it's a threat, and in the very same organisation, it's an opportunity. That's just...
So it's contextual depending on
depends
who's
on where you are,
answering,
who you are.
Answering the question. Yeah, I think the reason I marked it has been in the centre is I think all organisations have an opportunity to review purpose, to review how they turn up for employees, how they turn up for their customers, how they turn up for other stakeholders, for the planet. So this is a real moment where those orgs can have a bit of a rethink and reorganise themselves. I think from the threat side, many will just sit still and they'll observe, and then there'll be a oh shit moment, to put it bluntly, where they realise that they've got a new market entrant who is going to outperform them and break experience and cost base equations as they're known in a particular market.
So
What you said before about individual, the one-man billion company,
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting, because I do think, in smaller organisations and companies like HiveMind, where you can sort of amplify your footprint almost, because we can use the same technologies that the PWs and EYs can use.
Yeah.
We can apply the same scale. So it sort of makes you go, I can amplify this. I can amplify a small business to be a big business.
So that's basically looking through opportunity and not threat as per se, but rather risk that are associated. But the risk is either you'll have some value out of the AI systems or not. We are touching a little bit on culture of the organization as well. How you are introducing such a system. Yes, some people might think, oh, there's a threat that I'll be without a job. And we had this conversation that currently you could see, and that's research done, that 21% of jobs were gone. But at the same time, AI created 23%. So there's a ratio that is
really interesting when you said that.
The ratio is increasing. Of course, that's different. So I'm researching a little bit of shift in skill set that is needed. What will be obsolete, what not. But ultimate question is to these people, what is the value for a single person on a day-to-day job when we introduce AI? Am I just being augmented with this mundane job that is no more reports, etc., or am I being just replaced? And I think that because we are still missing the context through AI.
I think my mental model would be if I was in a repeatable job in a big organization and they gave me something which augmented it. I always remember the story of, the snake that sleeps next to you. It's not sleeping next to you to keep you warm. It's sleeping next to you to understand at what point you fit in its belly. And I think a lot of people might not think of it in exactly that parlance, but they would probably think the more I feed the machine, the more the machine will learn, the less value I have as a human for this organization, because the models are going to get better and better. And we come back to that iteration of metabolic rate of iteration around AI. It won't take long before it can be the equivalent of some of the people who work in orgs. And on the point of the skills and the job creation part, I agree. I think it's fantastic. But I think education probably has quite a way to go to catch up, to make sure that people are skilled appropriately.
I heard a brilliant story the other day, by the way, about this, and this is a generational thing. That the chap I was talking to was talking about how they've automated nearly every aspect of their job brilliantly, and they're a smart guy, and they have their systems running, and it's all AI driven. And I said, that's incredible. How do you? What's your boss think? He says, my boss thinks I'm one of the most productive workers in the company. He said, but he doesn't realise that I've actually automated nearly everything, because he hasn't got a clue what's going on. And I won't say his name on here because there's people out there watching this that know him. So
my youngest, he's big into his technology. He's 30, so you think he's 5 years away maybe from entering the workforce. I was talking to him about AI a couple of months back and asked him that question, what do you think of it? And he's like, don't know. And I'm like, no, go on, genuinely, what do you think of it? And he's like, it's great. And I'm like, well, why do you think it's great? And he's like, well, when I work, it helps me with my homework. And I'm like, well, what about when you start work? And he's like, well, it'll just do my job for me. And in his mind, it's that.
Yeah,
right? I can automate so much.
That's what Chris was saying. Oh, sorry, said his name.
I think when we think about opportunity or threat, I think there's a number of games in town, and one of the pieces that came out in the research I've done is pretty much organizations are either going to play offense or defense when it comes to AI. They can be proactive or they can be reactive. And as you can see from the quadrants, the people who play offense and are proactive, they'll lead. They'll go on and they'll create competitive differentiation. The reactive offense people will kind of fast follow. They'll learn from the patterns, they'll learn from the use cases, they'll learn from the business models.
Which is so often the case, though, isn't it? It's a repeat of so many other times of I'm going to say technologies. Sorry.
It is. The proactive defense people will get ready. They will get themselves into a position where if a new market entrant comes along, they will be ready to make a move. They'll have sorted their data. They'll have built some skills, and they'll have almost a watch and brief. The ones who worry me, and it's pulsing again. I can't remember if it was Pat who was fascinated or Mark by the pulsing. Right? Is the people who are reactive and defensive who sit still and do nothing, and think that this isn't going to affect them. And I think some organizations will make conscious choices to do that, and they will suffer. Other organizations are unfortunate that AI is emerging in the middle of strategic cycles, both from a technology and business strategy perspective for them, and they'll be reluctant to make change. But I think sitting still and neither playing a proactive defense or an offense game will be the new moving backwards. And there's a lot of risk there.
The new moving backwards.
So
have that one, Craig.
So it wouldn't be a discussion if we didn't talk about the Gen AI phenomena. It is here to stay. It isn't the only AI game in town. And when we look at the things like ChatGPT and Gemini, these are some of the experiences. I won't call them tools, Dave. Some of the experiences which have emerged that have had the fastest ever growth rates around usage. They're phenomenal. Yeah, I just wanted to draw the kind of panel's attention to a fairly generic and broad study by Reuters Institute and University of Oxford recently published, where they took 12,000 people and asked them a bunch of questions. And 42% of the respondents in the UK, fairly broad population is what I would stipulate here, only 42% of the respondents hadn't even heard of ChatGPT, and 2% of respondents use tools like ChatGPT or Copilot daily in their work. So one of the hypotheses here is AI for early adopters only? Is it a bubble that's going to burst and we're going to see a new normal arrive which is much more stable? What do you make of these usage stats?
I didn't believe them.
Yeah.
Sorry, crudely speaking, I was like, I can't believe that. Then I realised it was actually because of the industry I am in and the world that I live in. But I just struggled with the scale of it.
I also think that probably a lot of people out there wouldn't know what deep learning is or anything like this, but use it on a day-to-day basis with Alexa in the kitchen. So, over time, these tools are going to become prevalent in our everyday life, but no one will ever know it's a large language model or a small language model or any of these generative AI capabilities under the covers. It will just be Alexa, and Alexa now works far better for me. So I think it's the use case, and certainly in the consumer-facing markets, I think will be
Isn't it because we can just adapt to so many revolutions as per technology, and they thought, okay, in order to have certain level of adaptability, we need to just bring it slowly, and by the way, model will learn on responses. But at the same time, I remember when cars were so complicated, but everyone could change the oil, and they understood now you just a service bulb and you just go to a service. So I think that will be knowing how to use it, but not how it has been built.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Do you need to know how it's built?
I think the one which struck me the most is the 2% using tools like ChatGPT or Copilot daily. I'd actually thought that in some industries, or even when it's a broad sample, the number would have been closer to double digits than 2%.
2%.
So I would expect this presents an opportunity to many organizations to get going, not be so hurried that they create something which is visible but not valuable. They can focus on identifying use cases, designing things which really help people, zooming out and understanding where tools like Copilot, because it was in the study, I'll mention it, and ChatGPT can be used and integrated into overall processes.
I wonder how many people, not professionals, but on day-to-day activities, are using tools like, take out the background from my photo.
Yeah.
Thinking that it's just a function in my phone or an application or on a website.
Thousands.
Yeah. All the filters on social media apps.
So they don't know how it's being called, but they're using it on daily basis.
Yeah, I think
so. What I think what you're suggesting there, Pat, is there's kind of some subliminal kind of adoption of AI technologies taking place, and people don't realize it. So
they don't care. Why would they? I don't
so
care.
Do they need to a certain degree? Because it should be interface that helps us to achieve some of the results using machine. You don't need to learn basic like in 86 to just 2 + 2 is that.
I agree.
It is just the interface that helps us to do something.
That my Google phone can make somebody's sort of jump in the air high or something.
But I think that this adoption rate is important, because I remember early ages when we had Excel and people were not using formulas but just calculating something on calculator and then just dropping numbers without understanding how the tool can leverage their day-to-day work.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And another piece that we've been looking at here is around an AI readiness assessment, which we launched a couple of months back. So if you haven't taken it, I think we'll share the link either later in the broadcast or shortly afterwards. And what we've been doing is looking at the lessons we've learned from that, and there are really 5 building blocks when it comes to getting going with our AI that we've seen. And it's the first one's around strategy and advantage. So how do organizations create a useful AI strategy, and how do they identify those use cases which will bring competitive differentiation and value and advantage to their organization? The second building block that we've come across is all around those experience and patterns. So how does AI infuse, and Pat, you raised a great point around removing backgrounds and pictures, right? How does AI infuse itself into the experiences that people have every day in business and in society? And those experiences and patterns need to be really well thought through. I think if it's almost invisible and it's just there and things become intelligent, you've done it quite well. If it's an adjunct and somebody has to really learn it, have a think. The third building block was around culture and organization. This one was a really big one because we started to see people who used AI, but they didn't trust the machine. We had people who didn't want to use AI. We had people who didn't understand how the machine worked. So there's a whole bunch of things that we needed to unpack around how do you get an organization ready to make this stuff useful and make it sticky inside of business teams. Also, as a counterpart to that, how do you build the right organization structures and where do they sit in terms of running AI? We already heard you say, Dave, before, do you think the AI officer is probably not a permanent kind of C-suite role? Some organizations are creating office for Gen AI, others are taking different approaches, so we've seen some of that. The fourth block is around...
Wrong. It might be a useful thing to create, but don't expect to have a long-term job in it.
Are we not cannibalizing chief of staff then at the same time by introducing CIO? Because some of the parts of the work will be orchestrated.
It's a great conversation, because from the people I've talked to, I don't think that AI necessarily has the home in the CIO organization. most of the people who are championing it in the organizations I've spoken to,
business unit,
line of business leaders,
yeah,
VPs of business units. And that's really interesting because that's where the skills are finally getting built. And I think some CIOs will breathe a sigh of relief if it's a federated model and they're upskilling in the business unit.
Yeah, if I was a CIO, I'd ask what my role was in there. Yeah, being political, I would turn around and think, well, what's the role I play in there?
It's a fair question, but I don't think at the moment there's any one answer. I think you'd have to evaluate the broader context of each organization to work out where it fits.
I think it's interesting when the business units go out and I say do it themselves. It reminds me of the early days of SaaS, Salesforce and the like. Is this shadow IT kind of just appeared overnight on the head of marketing's credit card or whatever it might be, right? And none of the security or governance that you would expect of a normal IT program necessarily enforced.
And I think that brings us. We'll jump to the fifth block, then come back to the fourth: ethics and governance. Organizations who are deliberate and understand what they're trying to achieve with ethics to reduce bias and govern, responsible use of AI, they're the ones who are going to be able to steal a march and build trust with employees and all of the stakeholders. And the fourth block that we kind of uncovered was technology and data. So some of those deeper skills and some of those platform skills to make it real. I think, again, we've got a poll there, and it will be interesting to hear back from the audience. Which of the 5 building blocks do you think, is
the ones we're experiencing
most pertinent to you?
The ones we're experiencing the most around at the minute for me when I'm in conversations is the front 2: strategy and advantage, experience and patterns. And that's probably based on the idea that a lot of people have come at it from a design thinking aspect.
Yeah, they're identifying use cases. Yeah, I think that's
right, personally.
I think on the other side of the coin, what worries me a little bit is ethics and governance, because from a governance perspective, the shadow IT piece really is a concern because people are plugging in data into public-facing LLMs and giving away corporate material. I saw an insurance company who I think had shared a underwriting model. No,
so
that's a big risk.
Ever-going question about where we want to be as an organization, what needs to be true, how we are going to do it, and then just consider ethics and etc. So I believe that you are just switching in between all of these blocks, for lack of a better term, in order to leverage each one and then equally proceed further.
Perfect. And that intersects nicely into, as I said at the start, from the work that we'd done, we asked each of the panelists to give us kind of a 5 to 10 minute kind of overview on some of the themes that came out. So I think, Pat, this is the question that we gave to you. How do we create value with our early forays into AI? And this was from lots of organizations who probably felt that they were being forced into doing something which is visible by the board just to get some results.
I think you said visible, not valuable.
Visible, not valuable, yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's a great question, and ultimately you could answer carefully. And the rationale behind this, we all want this value from this AI. It is like answer to all of our problems, and we just go with this new technology and we think, it will sort our problem within the organization without even thinking what are the problems. And very often we are thinking about technology that will just solve it, while in fact it should come last. Because what you need to start, and I'm seeing it in many organizations that they are trying to do it, they're thinking that it is helpful for them to automate to a certain degree some of the aspects of a process. And yet you can think out up to 2023, 15% of organizations were just thinking about AI. That's like 3 agglomerations in UK.
15?
15, 1-5.
Wow.
That's nothing.
Yes.
Year later, 73%, I might just, butcher some of the statistics, but it's just beyond 70%. Organizations are training actively people on usage of AI. So, it does give us some numbers. And there's 200 billion investments coming into AI worldwide. I believe that there will be shift in market. Now, if we could just jump quickly, how we can start, because that's the question, how we start. Start with your problem. what is the problem, your research question that you want to solve by using potentially some technology. And that comes to getting people who are minded in governance, ethics. You need to start very early with data scientists, maybe someone from financial aspect as well, and through different lenses, look into that matter. Look if you have data or not.
I find that really interesting, Pat, because I think what a lot of people will do is they'll jump straight into solution. Yeah. And I think problem definition with a real level of fidelity will help massively steer any solution which comes downstream in the right direction.
Yeah, it's of paramount. Now, if you will not go with a problem thinking, you might end up, going with a hammer for every problem, and that's like, nail. The thing is that we should be looking through the lenses, is there any technology that will help us in solving these aspects or problems or not? Maybe you don't need AI. Maybe just simple automation will just be good enough for yourself in current state because of the cost associated.
There's the saying, isn't there, is don't automate a bad process, fix the process first, right? Isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
Precisely, because you'll just automate and just exponentially go with something really, really bad. Yeah. Now, when you have this problem identified, then you can just try things. And that, I think that it gives you this competitive edge if you know how to deal with the ambidexterity of delivering your product through your value chain or through your process, and at the same time
doesn't that lend itself, though, I keep saying this, I'm like a stuck record, to the whole concept of the design thinking, though, doesn't it really? Isn't that's ultimately problem definition, problem understanding?
Yeah, I think what I would like to see if I was going to an organization is that they'd actually done really good discovery work, and it involved all corners of their organization. When I used to run innovation programs, innovation in some of the big organizations was an ivory tower activity.
Yeah.
I can give an example of a financial institute where
you're going to name it?
No, don't want to get in trouble. And the ideas would all come from central office, and what we did is we started running ideation activities with people who were out on the edges, who work with customers, and we asked them how they felt about it, and they said it's a really good experience, and they felt that nobody really listened. And it was ironic because they were the people who spent all day every day fielding the customer problems, the customer questions live in real time. So they had hundreds of ideas on how they could build things which would change the game for customers. And I think innovation and the discovery for AI in this context needs to be considered a participation sport, and everybody needs to be given the equivalent of the badminton racket to go and play.
You mentioned knowledge gathering, and we've been through, is it going to be centralized or federated, which way to go? So if we have organizations which do not have any experimentation in place, if they don't spend some time to explore what are the possibilities, and in a short term try things, pick one model, see what's happening. Does that solve your problem? No, move to the next one.
That's sort of what I was touching on when I talked about design thinking in organizations who already have that mindset of experimentation, iteration, prototyping. They should be the least worried about AI adoption.
Yeah.
The ones that, and the ones...
It'll just feed into their strategy, Dave, and their capability.
Equally so, those organizations have already got their act together on data governance, data ownership, data management, data. They will also be able to get their head around it. The companies that are struggling with design thinking and struggling with data management are the ones that are going to be really hurt.
I think
it's change, isn't it? If you want to put it at that high level, some organisations just take so long to think about change.
I think to Pat's point about experimentation, if you went and asked 10 organisations, what does your experimentation process look like?
Yeah,
they would confuse it with an innovation process. It wouldn't be well defined, and it wouldn't be that well managed. There will be willing people trying to do it.
Oh, and
but it's often not.
We've both
not even that. I mean, from a hypothesis design perspective, what is the experiment going to achieve? They don't know what they're looking for. They're looking for serendipitous learning.
So that's okay. I had some organizations coming to me, and they were really, really honest. They said, look, we figured out that we had like 3 or 4 problems currently. We believe that through AI or whatever you tell us, that we can just sort out some of these. Currently, our process and let's say part of it takes us 4 hours to just, for instance, 1 week, how we can just improve that. So they had hypothesis already driven development in place. They had their metrics, and what they were looking for is like expertise in a tools, expertise in a strategy, but it starts with a vision, how we want to just utilize it ethically, for instance.
So the three things I would take away from what I heard from you, Pat, is get really good at understanding your problem.
Yes.
Go to all corners of your organization and build a really robust way of experimenting.
Yes.
And know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Of course, with strategy needs to be aligned with the business objectives and
absolutely.
ethics.
And I guess that, that brings us on to Mark. The question that came out that we provided to you was, what should my Horizon 1 activity set include? So I'm getting going. My counsel is I need to get some things done pretty quick, get some runs on the board. What do I need to do?
Yeah, so some of the key things for me is, well, a key thing here is ownership. So, we're just having the conversation, is it business or the technology function, the CIO? So, let's assume all organizations are different. It doesn't matter, but just pick one and they own it and they own the budget, but they have, if it's the business, they've got technology buy-in. If it's technology, they've got business buy-in, because in isolation, this is not going to work. I've seen many, and there's many cases of not having the stakeholders lined up and doing this all this experimentation and having a GitHub repo full of code that you can put live and no one will let you do it. So for me, that agreeing the ownership is critical. Resourcing skills we've touched on, but I think you need to look at it in a slightly wider way. Everyone thinks AI, let's get the data scientists involved, and but security, right? You've got data, you've got to potentially be putting this public. Getting security on board from day one is going to save you a world of pain. Ethics people maybe as well, depending on the organization, the data, but also, and again, we touched on this, right? This is going to go into a workflow. Either your customers are going to use it or your staff are going to use it. So what does that user experience look like? So you might not stand up all these people on day one. You might want to do that experimentation around your data and your models and seeing what works. But at some point, you're going to want to put this into a production, into even a limited run production. So acquiring data, absolutely key. We talked about it quite a lot, and anyone in this world will tell you data is important. Not just acquiring it, but making sure you understand it. So when you're trading models, if you're taking sensitive data, personal data, etc., out of it.
Acquiring data is quite important, and we like that because organizations already are leaking, but not leaking like in the cybersecurity sense, but they're not seeing the insights from this data. They don't have information that can help them with decisions. Even in the meetings, if you could just record the meetings, of course, with all the privacy intact, you could have some insights like, look, there's no water in the meeting rooms, and maybe that's the problem.
Yeah. I think the other thing around data as well, as we move on, is don't feel like you've got to go and build your new data lake strategy or anything. If you've got a well-defined problem, there's a reasonable chance the data is only going to come from a few places to help you work on that. So don't feel like you spend millions at a 2 year.
So that's a don't wait, find a pragmatic way.
Yeah, and you can do so much of this stuff without sounding like too much of a hacker, right? With CSV files or noisy bikes in the background, or a dump of data on a file share, right? As long as it's got the right controls around it, of course. So the next phase really is about that iterating, that experimentation. It's key that you have a set of boundaries, whether that's a time budget, a cost budget, a certain set of things you want to try. It stops that. Iterate, and you're still here in 6 months iterating, and the business are turning around and saying, well, what have you done with this? Lots of money. So really what you're trying to get to here is how feasible is it, and is that value that you expected? Is that there?
Yeah, metrics. And it looks like we are turning the outbound like marketing into our organization. We need to just go and look for a feedback like, okay, does that help you on your daily process? How the process looks like now? Is there anything that you need to, because shift skill, it's not only hard skills or analytical skills. Because of trust, we need to shift a little bit into more empathetical ways of working. Introducing such a, let's say, AI system might complicate the setting for one person. And yes, AI can help us to introduce AI basically, because we can tailor the language, we can tailor materials, even how to introduce such a complex system into the environment.
Yeah, and that's one key thing around the skills as well, is that's business skills as well. The end user needs to be involved in this. So
as early as possible.
yes, for sure. Yeah.
Why you're doing it?
Don't build it in your shed.
No, this is not an ivory tower activity. If you want to, so,
Yeah.
okay. So at some point you're going to get, hopefully you get to that point where you can demonstrate it will work. You're going to get value from it, and then it's about putting it live. So, LLMs are not perfect right now. They're a fast evolving technology. If you want to put them live, controlled go live is the way to go. If you've got a team internally that you can use, or friendly customers that you can use. We've all seen examples, haven't we, of probably recently one of the large search engines, won't mention them, having issues around their AI summaries. A controlled go live lets you get that more friendly feedback, rather than offering people discounts or refunds that don't exist. So that's absolutely important. Monitor for sure. Keep an eye on how people are prompting it, what information it's giving it back. Keep a human in the loop if you need to in the short term. It's
a human who knows how it works.
I think there's two sides. That's one, and the other one is it saying things it shouldn't do?
Yeah, because one thing that does concern me that I've seen some use cases do is the human becomes dependent on the AI, and I think as you coexist, it's super important that the human needs to be able to understand how the AI is producing the results.
So EU Act is just touching this as a regulatory piece. I don't recall me it's Article 4 or 5. But it is said that because of this bias that will rely on the decision being made by a machine, and considering the feedback loop and still feeding the machine with the wrong answers and then creating new wrong answers, that is how you maintain the quality. And this quality needs to be explainable as well. So I think we need to have this in mind.
Yeah, controlled go lives can be quite interesting because you can do almost like the AI comes up with an answer and a person, and you compare them, or you can do the AI comes up with an answer and the person validates it. That can lead to laziness. It's yes.
That's
no,
something I've seen.
Yeah.
That's something I've seen in retail banks around things like mortgage fraud.
Yeah,
they've got seasoned teams who've done it for years who can spot patterns, and it kind of harps back to IBM Watson when they asked Watson to beat Jeopardy. They'll bring people even out of retirement who've got some deep skills in some of these areas and test them against the machine to see what the variance is.
Yeah,
which is quite interesting because you're looking at 30 years experience of doing something versus a machine who's recognizing a pattern. So that's quite exciting for some.
Yeah, well, I think that, just in closing really around this, see this as an opportunity to learn, adapt, grow. Right? Don't be like, oh, it didn't work. It's the end of it. If it doesn't work, that's a valuable lesson in itself, right? You try something, it didn't work. Try something else. Yeah.
It always brings me back to when people say fail fast.
Yeah.
I always look at it and I always scowl a little bit because I always think learn fast.
And it's the same. AI hasn't made a difference to everything you've just described there. That's good practice.
So
amplified.
Yeah.
So we've been running for an hour, and I want to kind of move on a little bit to do some Q&A from anybody who's still out there listening. And
are you alive?
Are you alive? Yeah. So I guess one of the questions that's come in, I think, I don't know who wants to pick it up. Earlier in the conversation, there was a mention of LLMs, so large models. Yeah. So if we were to look at LLMs versus SLMs, do people always need to think about an LLM and the associated cost to build their experiences?
Shall I pick that one up?
Yeah. Go away.
Okay. So large language models are what we're most used to hearing about. So ChatGPT is a large language model. They are very costly to train and to run. A small language model can be much more tailored to a specific use case. You can do some really clever things around training them based on the output of a large language model, so they're almost as good. But the great thing really, and the advantage I would see in them, is the lower cost and the ability to tailor them to a specific use case.
That specific case is very, very important.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to have this very narrow expertise for X amount of time, and that will be beneficial for organization in your own setting. You don't need to go with something massive and big. Just go with something small, which is sustainability again, and maybe privacy and policy will be easier to maintain, but then you have less problems if we think, for instance, in a financial sector, when you would like to digest, for lack of a better term, some of the financial aspects, and anonymity will be easier to maintain.
Yeah, so I guess the other question that has kind of come up time and time again is, what type of skills should these organizations be building? And where do they access them?
That's a great question.
I thought you got answered.
No, you can answer that one.
I can try a little bit.
Go on, Pat.
So I'm looking into shift skill in the organization to make AI introductions successful. And it is a process that does require change, does require working with people. I mentioned earlier that you need some empathy. So that is the skill, like emotional intelligence, that we need to embed it very deeply in the organization to start with some of the change. Yes, technical skills are important. Analytical skills will be important. Mathematical skills, yes, will be important. Not in every role, just as we mentioned that it will be transparent interface for some. But I believe whatever makes us human is the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree with you actually. Yeah, I completely agree that in the world of this like advanced technological marvel, the thing that shines out most is how human we can be in the face of
We can be very adaptable and we have a lot of talents, but saying talents, AI might help us to reveal these talents by giving, democratization of a data, for instance.
I think also as well on the human side of this, we are looking to come back with another Spark Unplugged in a month or so, where we can talk about this from a human perspective, and we're talking about it in the context of high performance workplace, change management, all of the behavioral psychology that goes alongside that. So that's something that we'll probably pick up on, because I know a lot of the stuff that we've got come through today is more around the technology part. So I just don't want to lose focus on that too much. We've got a question here that says, in my humble opinion, every company and organization that wants to stay relevant over the next 5 to 10 years should explicitly at least launch an AI So What project. As Dave has said, trial something small that demonstrates value or the potential for value. If we take it, start small, what's our thoughts on that, and get something out there? Is that the visible, not valuable?
So if I can pronounce his name correctly, Andrew Ng, who is classed as one of the godfathers of AI, says exactly that. He says no AI project has failed from starting too small.
It's great to know I'm next to the godfather of AI. Fantastic.
Who's the godfather of AI?
I don't know.
Andrew Ng. I can't pronounce his last name. NG, his last name. So he was chief scientist at Google, but they do.
We got another question coming here around. It's a performance management question. Suppose you look at these business augmenting AI systems like an agency worker, where you own the uniform, brand and reputation and the value of the work they do. With the right tool to eject the ML tool, how do you distinguish a tool failure from an AI-assisted bad faith employee? Oh my. Dave Clark.
Brilliant question.
Fantastic question.
I'd love it. Who asked that?
I'm not saying.
I always want to call them out and bring them on stage, because that's the question that's being asked, and I think that there's an answer lurking in there. I'm not going to even try and answer that.
So what was the question? Is it?
It's around performance
Who to blame?
management. Who's to blame?
Who's to blame?
Deployer, developer, or...
So does the AI go wrong and the person blindly follows it, or does the AI give the right answer and the person incorrectly?
Yeah, I think I haven't seen a use case yet where there hasn't been a maker-checker process in place.
Okay, so if you look at self-driving cars, right, just as an analogy, the driver, like irrespective of it's on full autopilot, whether that really exists or not, right? The driver is always in control, and insurance, legal purposes, etc., is responsible, grown up.
So the human ends up taking the ultimate.
That's the closest analogy I can come to it. I don't know how dodgy ground I'm going to go on if I start to explore that bit further, but I think at the moment that's the way kind of the world works, isn't it?
I think it's a fantastic question, one we should maybe have think a bit more around, because I know we did some thought pieces recently.
Still want to know who asked it.
So
I will tell
you need to start with groundbreaking rules. How you are going to use the technology in your organization, how you are going to use AI systems. And if you are saying, yes, it is something that will augment your decision, it will bring the data to make informed decisions. However, every decision is your signature underneath. then we are treating it differently. If we don't have this transparency, how AI systems has been used, then we have a problem.
It sort of
at
makes
the
you
core.
feel as if it's something to do with the risk. It's what's the risk of the decision-making process as well. You know, if it's somebody giving some advice on, I don't know, how to clean their windows, then I'm not going to worry about it as much as somebody turning around and saying,
Who made a decision?
you
That's
know,
basically.
I go online and do sort of self-diagnostics.
I think it's going to be an emerging space.
Yeah.
And I think what will happen is contracts will change.
It's a fascinating question.
Performance, you know, it is a fascinating
But it is a
question.
good question.
Yeah.
We have another one come in as well.
We
It's,
had an easy one this time.
well, I'm not. Yeah. Okay.
You've gone into that really happy-looking space.
Yeah, I'm just reading the questions.
You're literally just going
So-
into question reading mode.
So yeah,
Despite the
He's
years
enjoying
of-
it.
Despite the years of Google and Microsoft in advanced AI. Now
So-
it's suddenly I'm just reading the questions.
But it can be replaced now. can't
Dave, you're padding now. You're padding out to the end of the
I
Q&A,
don't-
the
I
end of
don't
the
wanna
panel.
get any more.
So the question is, how mature is the conversation between vendors of AI and stroke ML and business? Can either party tell the difference between being 2 weeks in production, fine-tuning of an impressive proof of concept, and $2 billion of investment to find out what you're never going to get better than intern level of quality?
You could answer that
Yeah.
question without AI. What's the conversation between vendors and
Yeah.
business? Well, the very large vendors are in it to make large amounts of money. The conversations will be optimistic. that's what they do.
That's kind of my line on that one.
Sorry, I'm really one of the sort of reasons behind starting HiveMind was my cynicism with large suppliers. So,
I think it's I think it's a really interesting one. I think, you know, if you start to look at the services that the big vendors offer, if they went hell for leather at people adopting AI and replacing humans in the workplace, it cannibalizes their own business model.
Yeah, that's what
If you're a large Seattle-based software company who uses a per user per month model effectively to sell bums on seats for your products, and you remove those bums on seats without a viable alternative, your stock price isn't going to stay stable for too long.
Yeah.
So I think what we'll find is, in the short term, there'll be lots of investment from the tech companies to help people get some of these use cases up and running, and where they see value and where they'll see the ability to drive reference cases in industries, and it'll be an industry level. They will they'll pursue the conversation, they'll make the investment.
So it almost goes back to our rate of change conversation earlier on, doesn't it? There's, you know, we were talking about data and cost of running these things, but there could be business model
And business
constraints.
readiness.
But yeah, business ready.
Slow
yeah.
down just because it will just
We
hit us too early.
we have another one come in, which is surely to get it says surely to get the most out of AI, you need to better understand the data and information you have,
Yeah.
and how this supports the business first.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
It has
No,
alignment with business
All you
outcomes.
can do with that question is go, yes.
Yeah. And I think
I concur.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think, but don't look at it necessarily like if your use case means, and let's talk about a decent sized organization, a large organization. If your use case says I need data from everywhere, you're probably thinking too big. So yeah, if I've built models on relatively small data sets from one back-end system to predict a business outcome, and it's demonstrated value, right? You don't necessarily need terabytes of data from 50 systems to make this stuff work.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yes, understand it for sure.
Concur.
Another question is, how do we make sure that there's better conversations and level setting on education around what AI is between boards, C-suites, and leadership teams?
Oh, wow. Well, sorry, I'm not normally product-y orientated, but we've talked about exactly that and have been running those sessions where I think awareness sessions are really important. And they don't even have to be big. Like, you can do like half-day awareness sessions and start. That's my view of it. Level playing field's a really great word, though.
There is a feeling, I guess, which is out there when, you know, some of the people I've talked to in the C-suite where they've had conversations with their board. The board think this AI pieces, I don't know if it's a very American thing, there used to be a button with easy written on it that you got from Staples, and you'd press it and it would say, that was easy. And one of the C-suite members said to me, the board seem to think we've now got access to this button where we press it and it solves all the problems using AI. And we need to educate them that that's not necessarily the case, but the message that might be getting sent by other parties is that they can buy something off the peg and it will get going.
Sorry, I'm going right back to the moment where you just go, it's all right, we're fine, we appointed the chief AI officer over there. Don't worry, it's all good.
Moving on.
Yeah, I have a very high level of cynicism.
Yeah, I know, that's right. Yeah.
So I'm just looking down.
Come on, pick some more out.
Bum. Let me see.
Is there only 3?
No. No, I'm scrolling around them. I've had the bad faith one, answered that one. So I'll come back to the one that was only partly displaying. In my humble opinion, every company and organization that wants to stay relevant over the next 5 to 10 years should explicitly at least launch an AI. So what project? As Dave said, trial something small that demonstrates value or potential value. Establish the basic governance and controls and behaviors that are value, risk, and education focused, and then see where to. This puppy is only going to grow stronger and more capable, not the opposite way around. So I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but I think what I'd like to take out of it is one of the building blocks we had is around ethics and governance. I'll class there to be some basics that would need to be in place in that building block to even do some of these things. What should people be looking to build as an organization to make sure that they've at least got a baseline level of the right materials in that space?
You start with cybersecurity. If you want to start considering that you know what you are trying to build, because you know what the problem is, and you are trying to figure out a solution to it through AI systems, you need data. So your cybersecurity privacy policy, ethical aspects needs to be in place, adjusted governance within your organization. At the same time, you need to look to regulations like EU AI Act, when you need to assess the risk of the model that you are trying to build. If it is just a small chatbot that will be just answering what is or help you to reset your password because you forgot, okay, then we know that it's a very low risk associated. But if you are thinking about creating marketing materials, and that's kind of a peculiar example, you might think, okay, I want ChatGPT, just for instance, to create some copyrights just to inspire me. And you might utilize other models to build that. But very often and very quickly, you might turn that model that will be very, very risky at some point, because you will be starting profiling people, how to trigger their actions. And you might just be selling something or presenting offer for a person that might be vulnerable just because script told you that. So the risk is very, very much associated, and you need to assess that.
So the cybersecurity thing is really important to me, in data security specifically. So if you imagine traditional software development, you generally have a set of synthetic data which you use for development against, and your testers have got access to it. These models are trained on live data. Training on synthetic data is not necessarily going to get you the answer that you want, or you're making it incredibly hard for yourself. So dev teams, right, sat there on live data is something that many organizations really struggle with, and you need to put the controls in place.
Precisely. So the constraints, we had this conversation, the balance between innovation and regulation. You need to just keep it in a healthy balance.
Awesome. Sounds wonderful. So what I'm going to do is going to change up a little bit and come back to the slides and kind of move to you, Dave, I think. I
was starting to relax. Yeah. She's starting to get into it.
Now you've got to hit your peak flow.
Oh, okay.
So how are HiveMind curating the assets that it's got to accelerate AI for everybody?
Well, we're doing 5 things, aren't we? So there's the one that I actually find really helpful at the minute for me, as probably the oldest person at the table by at least 15 years, is the playbook. And I do like the idea that we're actually creating a AI playbook, which is a distillation of best practice from people like Pat and yourself, Craig and Mark. So we've got the Launchpad playbook, which is our view on how you can go about doing this sort of stuff.
And it's coming soon, right? Next few weeks?
Yeah, next couple of weeks. And obviously anybody on the call, we're going to share it with members, clients, LinkedIn. But we think it's a best practice playbook I'm rather excited about it. I can read it and understand it, and that's going to be a good thing. So,
Yeah.
And then after the playbook, there's the what's the next one we're doing?
Sorry, Dave.
Oh, you've just jumped through the slides.
It's managed to go back to the start.
Sorry, guys. I do apologise.
I've got the smallest window in the world to click on these things, Dave, so I apologise.
Recently in
Oh, it's
HiveMind.
all right. Anyway, we've got readiness assessments that we're doing. We've got a bunch of accelerators that we've also got, which are the accelerators. We talked about the workshops and different workshops and design workshops and awareness workshops. We've got a bunch of those going on as well.
I think they're really exciting because I think some of the topics that we've covered today actually lean quite heavily into them. So,
well, I think they're understandable and affordable. That's my space. That's why I like them. So
yeah,
they range from the very simple awareness level stuff through to
running an experiment.
Running an experiment, which is I really like the running the experiment one because it's like so neat and well defined about the stages that you could do an experiment in. So I really like those. I'm going to let you talk about the skills building.
Yeah, I think.
To be fair, Craig, you've done the most work on this.
No, it's Ruth, who's probably.
Well, she's sitting off camera, so we can't bring her in.
So yeah, I think one of the things that we're very conscious of is we want to curate kind of the best set of skills we can, or nurture the best set of skills we can, not just in the member base but in customers. So what we're actually trying to do is pull together several sources of learning that we've seen across the across different channels, LinkedIn, internet more broadly, and we're looking to make sure that the people who are working with us and liaising with us have got the opportunity to get access to some great content from the likes of MIT, from Google, from Microsoft, a bit of Stanford in there, maybe some Oxford, some Cambridge stuff, that all these places who are producing lots of material so that people can level up, get the badges, so that we can all have a better conversation and be more
which I think
more
we're going to
proficient
share
with
again,
AI.
aren't we? And we're going to share that with people as well.
We'll be hopefully sharing that in the near future.
Oh, in fact, it's just
it's probably just been shared. So Ruth is super efficient.
Well done, Ruth.
And the fourth thing that we have is the AI readiness assessment. I think it went live a month or two ago.
I think we're going to share that.
We'll probably share that again. If you haven't already had a look at the AI readiness assessment, give it a click, go through it. We're always looking at the results. We're looking to learn from it, and we're going to build more propositions, services, and understand what people want and need and where they are from some of the data that we get out the back of this. So it's kind of a really important building block. If people need help in this kind of space, we can wrap concierge services around it as well, so that people don't have to go through it on their own, and we can help them interpret what.
Well, I think the philosophy that we've always had in the network is always about being sharing rather than proprietariness, if that's the right word for it.
And your fifth building block, Dave, is around ecosystem and partnership.
We're loving this bit at the minute, guys, because effectively no man is an island, and we are having to look at building a really interesting ecosystem. We're talking to the Googles, the Microsofts, and starting to look at partnerships so that we can go from sort of cradle to grave, and I'm excited about those. And also micro firms and people like Mark and Pat, how we create partnerships, because it's no single organisation, I think, can address all of these challenges.
I think if we stay true to the spirit that you mentioned, or we've mentioned on the panel earlier, that AI is going to be everywhere, and it's going to be experience, there's going to be strategy, there's going to be technology pieces, there's going to be human pieces, there's human psychology pieces. It's going to take an ecosystem. I don't think any one partner
can do it all. They will say they can, but
they will. But I would suggest that you will need deep specialisms in some of these areas, and the only way to get access to that will be to partner. So I think those are 5 really key building blocks, which kind of brings us towards the end. So I want to thank everybody for attending, and thank
huge thanks to the people.
Thank the panelists. But I want to go around and get one thing from each of you that, if you were an organisation starting your AI journey to do today, what would be the first thing you do? Who wants to go first?
Oh, Pat can.
Pat.
Oh, who wants to go first?
No, I
Great. Think about what you are trying to solve and achieve, and then look what can help you with that.
That is the first thing. The second thing, if assuming that data and AI are natural, I guess, ways of solving that problem. Start with your data.
I'd actually just go back, if I think about when I worked for some of the big organisations at C-suite level, I'd probably want to run one of the awareness programs. That would be my start point. For me, at that time in my life, at that point, I would want to get everyone at the same level. That would be what I'd do. But that's just me.
Yeah, I think mine would be I would encourage them to not forget the people and understand the people in their organisation and the impact it might have on them. And I would almost try to poll them to see how they would feel about an AI-infused workplace and what would make them feel better. Because talent has choice, and if talent is in your organisation and they don't like something you're doing with AI, I give the example of a relationship banker or a content creator. If their job is fundamentally shifted from being a creator or an experience provider into a marshal of something which is generated, they might just attrit and they might just leave, and then you'll lose something which I don't think AI can probably give us yet, which is genuine creativity and brilliance.
I'm going to use a quote that I read from Dave Aaron, who is a really good friend of mine in Gartner, and he said the most exciting future will be a combination of both man and machine.
Yeah, I think that's a great one.
Yeah.
So I think we're bang on time. So thank you again, panelists. Thank you everybody.
Thank you. It's
been
an interesting
we want
episode.
to make sure that we get some more Spark Unplugged sessions in.
So we'd like to hear what people would like to do.
We'd like to hear what people would like to discuss. Yeah, we've got some great ideas around high performance workplace. There's a few others out there, customer centricity. But if you've got anything that you think you would like to be on the panel with, or any big questions you'd like to ask,
I think
reach out.
Getting people on the panel would be fantastic. Really, really good.
So hope everybody has a great evening and good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Change is constant where the future's taking flight.